Welcome to the Belonging Project podcast. This is Fiorenza and I'm your host. The purpose of this podcast is to bring voices together to talk about belonging. Through inspiring, real-life conversations, we explore how belonging can show up in so many different ways, what it feels like to belong, and the impact of truly belonging. Each episode will offer you inspiration and practical strategies to find your true voice in your life and as a leader. Let's dive in. Hi, Abda. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy to have you, and it is quite an honor, actually, to have you on the podcast. You are the first author that we have as a guest on the Belonging Project podcast, so a milestone, very exciting.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you so much. That's lovely to know that I'm the first author. But it's so lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And maybe just to share how we've met. So I've had the pleasure of meeting you after reading one of your books, Razia, which talks about victims of domestic violence and also explores much more, such as the different cultural lenses. And we'll talk a bit more about the book probably in our conversation today. And I will also make sure that I share all the details about the book in the episode show notes. And so you are a writer, of course, and you're also a lawyer. And maybe we can start with that, with anything that you'd like to share with us about you. How does that sound?
Yeah, of course. I am a lawyer by profession, and I've been doing my legal work for about 30 years now, believe it or not. Probably a bit longer actually. Showing my age now. I think it's been, coming up to 31 years, I'd say I have been in the legal profession. But I started writing probably about 8 years ago because I just felt like there were a lot of people, and especially women, that I'd come across, and themes that I thought were missing from contemporary British fiction. So I just thought that it would be good to have a different perspective out there that's not available, because I've worked with a lot of women through, not only through the legal side, but through charitable work and voluntary work, and I just felt as though their stories were missing. So that's what kind of got me into writing in the first place. But I don't just write now. I tend to so do my legal work part time, and I also, as well as writing, I do different types of writing. So I write fiction, which is my novels. I finished my third novel now. I've just got to decide where to place it or what to do with it. And I've been researching for my fourth novel, which is going to be my first historical novel, and perhaps we can talk about that later. But also, I do creative projects as well, and I teach creative writing, and in particular, I teach about culturally sensitive writing. That's become very, very popular now. So I'm getting a lot of requests to do those workshops actually. So it's funny how you start writing with no other intention other than just to write about people, characters, communities that you feel are underrepresented. And then that kind of leads you to other things, and it's been a lovely journey in that sense.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to maybe just ask a follow-up question, or rather a clarification. What does that exactly entail, culturally sensitive writing?
So it's all about. So a lot of workplaces have training about, implicit bias and microaggressions, and not to stereotype. However, a lot of, well, especially writers, but also people working generally in different industries, we all write, don't we? We do blogs, we write social media posts, we write communications. You might be in PR, and it's about being aware that you've got to be careful not to peddle negative stereotypes. Maybe try and be aware about your own biases, because we all think we're not biased, because often we think it doesn't align with our values. We have good values, so we can't be biased, but we're all biased to some extent. So just recognizing that and making sure that your writing is as culturally sensitive as possible. So I do different courses. I do a 1 hour little taster workshop. I do a half day course, but I also do a 5 week, 2 hours a week course, like 5 workshops as well. So it depends how detailed anybody wants to go into this. But people actually go away sort of really, quite a lot of people have said to me, wow, there's just so much to think about. And actually, some of the exercises surprise them, when they do them, because what you find is the dominant culture doesn't often think about their culture. But when you're from an ethnic minority, you think about your culture all the time when you're in a minority culture. So one of the first exercises is to think about your own culture. And I think what happens with that exercise is people from the dominant culture tend to struggle with that exercise, whereas people from ethnic minorities like just write loads because they've
Yeah.
grown up thinking about their culture all the time. So you see, and I think that's quite telling, I think, because that shows that when you're from a dominant culture, you actually don't think about culture
Mhm.
and what that actually means. So perhaps if you don't think about culture and what your culture means, are you sensitive to other cultures if you don't really even think about culture? So
Yeah.
so it's quite telling, some of the exercises. And I think sometimes people get quite upset actually, because there's a test I ask them to do, which reveals kind of like your level of bias. And then sometimes people are quite surprised. Last workshop I had, lady was a little bit upset actually, that she said, well, I didn't realize I had these biases. And obviously that's why I'm on this course, because, I want to address these issues. And it's not just about me saying, oh, we mustn't stereotype and we mustn't perpetuate cultural myths. We mustn't engage in cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
It's about the implications of it. So
Mm.
it's literally like all the amalgamation of all the different forms of writing and creativity, films, social media, television, newspaper articles. If you put all those together, they have a very negative impact on those who are stereotyped. And actually, sometimes it can mean life or death, even, because that perpetuation of negative stereotyping or cultural myths. For example, I'll just give you an example. I feel like I should actually give an example now. Your listeners will be thinking, what's she talking about life and death for? But for example, in England and Wales, black women are 4 times more likely to die, and Asian women twice as likely to die as white women before, during, and after childbirth. Now, there's a lot of research showing that some of those figures are due to the fact that there's quite a lot of stereotyping involved in their care. So one example would be, for example, most people think that's women from South Asia, so Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi. There's this assumption that they live in extended families. There's this assumption that they have lots of help when they get home. There's this assumption that they don't need to be seen as much as somebody, like a white woman, because there's research that shows that they're seen a lot less once they're discharged.
Mm.
And there is this like belief amongst midwives and medical healthcare professionals who do an amazing job. I am not taking that away from them, but there is this belief that this woman must have lots of help at home. But no, you have to ask the question, because she might not have any help at home. She may not speak English. She may have come from abroad. She may not have any friends or family. And in fact, I've worked with a lot of vulnerable women over the years. And one of the projects I did in 2019, called Sidelines to Centre Stage, was a creative project where I worked with women in domestic survivors of domestic violence in refuges here in Birmingham, and also Muslim women who'd been to prison but were now part of the rehabilitation process. So two distinct sets of women, and their work was then anonymised and performed on stage. But the point is that, for example, one of these women told me that she had come from Pakistan, and then when she got here, she was subjected to abuse by her husband. And part of this was the fact that he would go away for days on end to work, and then he would just lock her in the apartment. He would just lock her in the flat, and she had no means of getting out. So when she had the baby, sometimes she wouldn't have enough nappies or enough formula milk for the baby. So she said that obviously the midwives didn't ask her any questions, and she was kind of left on her own in this very, very abusive situation. And to be honest, if there'd been a fire or anything, her and the baby wouldn't have survived. They had no means of escape from that apartment.
Mm.
So she said a health visitor came for a routine check, and she asked her how she was doing, and then she said she told her what was going on, and straight away the health visitor got her out of that very abusive, dangerous situation and got her into refuge. So that's the point. I think there's there are preconceived ideas we have about people. When I say, oh, our writing or our adverts or our social media posts or our newspaper headlines shouldn't stereotype, there are very good reasons for that. There's the reasons of self-esteem, mental health. There's lots and lots of research about all of these issues. So that's so I approach it from a sense of writing as opposed to I know a lot of people do workplace courses about how to behave towards colleagues and other employees and things like that, but I do it from the perspective of writing, so that making sure that your writing is culturally sensitive. So yeah, I could go on for ages about that, but I won't.
That's really, really important work. And also, hopefully, it helps brings awareness,
Yeah.
right? In just how maybe we may say things, write things, and not, for some, maybe not realize that
Mm.
implications it can have.
Yeah, usually it's not intentional. Usually it's people just don't realize they're doing something, and that's the whole point of like examining your own bias and being aware of your own biases. Because sometimes people will use a meme, like on social media. You get so many memes these days, use so many gifs, but sometimes we just do things without thinking that actually, if somebody from that community actually saw that, would they be upset? Would they be happy? Or if you write something, what would somebody from that community think? There are so many examples where even like massive corporations have got it terribly wrong, and I do sort of discuss those examples. And so if massive organizations can get it wrong, we can all get it wrong. In terms of authors, even like J.K. Rowling has had a lot of criticism for some of her work. So even if her editors don't pick up on it,
Yeah.
it's worth considering in terms of your writing.
You've mentioned that you have a book about to be out and another one in the making. Did I get that
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So I've got two novels already published. So I've got Stained, which was published back in 2016. That was actually published in America, but it is available worldwide on Amazon. And I've also got Rizia, which was published in 2019, which is the one that you read. Again, which is widely available in paperback, Kindle. And then I have finished writing my third novel. I've got to send it out yet, and I've got to get that process rolling of getting it actually published. But that's that's an interesting one as well. I mean, I've kind of like enjoyed writing it, but it's actually been quite tough as well because it's about gaslighting as a form of emotional abuse, as a form of domestic abuse. So it's the storyline, sort of briefly, is about it's a courtroom drama, and it's about a wife who's accused of killing her husband. So she's accused of murder, and then the trial kind of flits between the courtroom and their 2-year marriage, and it brings to light instances of gaslighting and the abuse that she suffered. And I think the ending is kind of leaves the reader with a moral question really about things like abuse and what does constitute abuse, what doesn't constitute abuse. So
Mm.
yeah, I think that was a bit different for me because I wrote in the third person narrative, but also first person narrative. I flitted between different time zones, so for me that was interesting to do. So that one I'm quite excited about. I've just been so busy with other things, haven't had a chance to actually sit down and like really polish it and then get it out there. And then I've been carrying out research last year into World War II, the Burma campaign, because my late father actually fought in that as an Indian soldier. Later became Pakistan, so he's on the Pakistan side, but at that time it was the Indian Army. And he fought alongside the British in Burma. And I'm really passionate about underrepresented voices, and I feel like all the narrative about the
Mm.
Second World War is very Eurocentric, and centered around the British and the American. And again, I wanted to really talk about, men like him and what they went through and the sacrifices they made, because their stories are not really well known. Mainly because a lot of them were illiterate. They didn't write letters back home and didn't receive letters. They didn't have diaries or journals. So, with the British soldiers and the Americans, there's a lot of written material you can access. But with the Indian soldiers, there's very little. So really, but my dad did tell me quite a few stories. I mean, I used to pester him when I was little to tell me stories. So um, he never actually volunteered the information, I have to say, because, and I know now, having researched it, it was just so horrific that I'm not surprised he didn't volunteer to talk about it. But as a child, I used to, kind of like say, "Oh, tell me about the war and tell me about when you were young." And so it's just that it's been at the back of my mind for a very long time, and I thought I really need to do something with it now. So I've done the research, and I will be starting writing that, I think, in the autumn. I'm just going to try and put pen to paper and start writing that. But I'm going to be part of a Channel 4 documentary about this topic as well. It's really interesting how these things happen, because I put out a tweet last year about my father and his story and the fact that I was carrying out this research. And a producer, Channel 4 producer, contacted me, and she said, "Oh, I saw your tweet and I'd love to talk to you about this." I had to sign an NDA, so I can't really talk about the program, sadly. Um, yeah, I can't really. Only I can only say that I mean, I was invited to speak, give an interview about my dad's kind of story, and again, that's great because it's very rare that you'll find that angle of that war. So I will let you know when the documentary comes out. I think it's later this year. I'm not exactly sure, but it's fascinating. I mean, it is such a fascinating topic, and I think that those memories of talking to my dad about what happened in that war, and when I look back now, I was asking very childlike questions, but still they were really telling, in terms of what actually happened. And he lied about his age to get into the army because he came from a really poor family, and he wanted to sort of like have a regular income so their financial circumstances could improve. So it's a great sacrifice that he made, I think.
Well, certainly, those are two books that I will want to read.
Oh,
That's for sure. And so there's what I'm hearing is a passion around amplifying maybe the voices of underrepresented groups.
yeah.
And I can certainly sense the link with belonging. And I'd love to, hear from you. Maybe you must have, I imagine, received so many, feedback on your books and on your work. Whether there were any stories, of people that really felt a sense of belonging, maybe in reading, or were helped in different ways. And maybe your own also, I guess, personal take on belonging. That was so many questions that I just
Yeah.
thrown at
Well,
you.
I
I'm
think, I
sorry.
think, yeah, I think, I think words have power, don't they? I think that's the thing you have to remember. And quite often, as a writer or a creative artist, you're not always going to hear the stories, but sometimes you do, and it's really fascinating. So if I start at the beginning of my journey, when I wrote Stained. I mean, people say to me, "Wow, you started with this topic as your first book." But at that time, it's what I felt quite passionate about. So Stained is about rape, and it's about a young woman who has to make certain decisions to preserve the family honour as a result of enduring this awful sexual attack. So it explores very difficult issues, right? But then after the book was released, I had so many emails from women who some just wanted to share their stories with me. Some just wanted to say thank you for writing about a topic that's largely ignored and for doing it. But they say, I mean, I do believe I did it. I did it sensitively, right? So because it's not an easy topic to to talk about or write about, but I wanted to do it justice. But then, interestingly, there was a couple of women, and one woman in particular who wrote to me and said that as a direct result of reading your book, I'm now going to report my rape to the police. She said she was raped 4 years previously, and she'd never reported it because of this pressure of family honour. And now
Wow.
she wanted to do it. So for me, it's stories like that. And the thing is, for one, every story you'll hear, there are many, many that you won't hear. But stories like that make it all worthwhile. It was worth spending a year writing that book, even if it just helped one person. And then moving on to Razia. Razia is different. It's about modern slavery, human trafficking, and cultural aspects, and on so-called honor abuse comes into it as well. And so that was in the sense that people wrote to me and said, "Oh wow, I didn't really know that much about modern slavery and human trafficking, and I feel more enlightened." But also, a lot of women wrote to me and said, "Thank you for portraying this modern woman, modern British Asian woman that we rarely get to see in fiction. Somebody who they could relate to." So
Yeah.
Farah, the main character, is somebody that a lot of women told me that they could relate to. They reminded her of them. Her parents reminded them of their parents. Her workplace, her whole outlook. So that was lovely to hear that people felt represented, because again, like, I am passionate about that, representing people who are normally underrepresented in fiction. And then the creative projects that I've done, like, so Sidelines, which is 2019, the shows that we did really affected people. And because it weren't scripts written by a scriptwriter, they were the women's actual words. So they were the women's experiences, anonymized. So obviously, I gave them complete anonymity. I wanted to keep them safe. And I was actually approached by a morning show asking me to go on there and to have one or two of the women come and talk. And I had to refuse because I had to ensure that they remained anonymous. So I couldn't really promote it in the way that perhaps I could have done with other projects. But again, I remember after the theatre show, remember afterwards, especially quite a lot of men coming up to me and saying, "We had no idea this happens." Because if you're not exposed to it in your family or in your environment, then you probably don't think that this kind of thing happens. So it's again, it was sharing untold stories and unheard voices with a cross section of society. And then this latest project that I've done, WA Tales, is a very niche and unique project. I what I've done is I had some sharing sessions here in Birmingham, and I invited people from the community, especially older people, to share their old folk songs, because these old folk songs are passed down orally from generation to generation. There's no written version of the types of Punjabi that we speak in Pakistan. So these are not, preserved in writing, if you like. So it was really interesting. Collected all these songs and I transliterated and translated them. And then I held these workshops, about 10 workshops with women in Birmingham. And then from there, we created some lovely pieces. I also commissioned some new poetry, and a couple of actresses who worked with me on this, delivering. So I wrote a script to tie in all the different themes and all. There was so much material there, but again, it was about representing sections of the community that don't feel represented. And the survey that I sent out, the responses that have come back is that, significantly, because I believe that if people quite often people say ethnic minorities don't engage with the arts, but I feel like that they don't feel like the arts is for them, because I don't feel a lot of the time they think that they can be part of the art scene. So I think a lot of the time they think it's white middle class people, such as like opera or
Mhm.
galleries or exhibitions or art, paintings or sculptures. All these things. They don't feel like they have any connection with it. So I feel like if you can put on art that they can connect with, then they will engage with it as well. And true enough, we had such good engagement at the actual shows, community engagement and wider engagement at the theatre. People from many backgrounds came, and what the people said was the main reason they came was because they could identify with it. The
Right.
people that came from a South Asian background, they said they came because they could identify with it. Would you like to see more art that you could identify with? Yes, 100%. 100%. Even the people from outside the community who were white British, said, yes, we'd love to see more of this, because they feel like they learned a lot from it. So you see, I feel like it's one of those vicious circles. Like, yes, ethnic minorities don't engage with the arts, but then there's no arts for them to connect with, and they don't engage with it because they can't connect with it. So you've got to have projects that they can relate to for them to then engage with it. So I'm grateful to the Arts Council for funding it and for taking a chance on it, really.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's very much, I can totally, resonate with what you said there. The sometimes we don't know how to connect,
Mm.
and then it just kind of can just feel awkward, right?
Yeah, yeah.
um, but then would we do we feel comfortable enough to be proactive about it?
Mm,
Maybe
mm.
some people will and some others won't. But when you have project like this that helps bring people together, it
Yeah.
is actually quite a gift, right?
Oh my goodness, it was actually the theatre showing at the Midland Arts Centre in Birmingham was on the hottest day ever in this country on the 19th of July, and we were just roasting, but that didn't keep people away. People still came.
Amazing.
So I was so grateful that people actually still turned up. It was incredibly hot, as you remember.
It was a very hot day. I think we probably hit a record day as well.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
What does belonging mean to you?
Belong. See, I think belonging is where you feel most comfortable. And I think belonging can take lots of different shapes and forms. It can be your home, it can be your country, it can be your family, it can be your wider community, it can be your workplace. There's so many places where you can feel like you belong, but then equally you can feel like you don't belong. And I think belonging is nurtured by the people around you. That sense of belonging is collective. It can't be you can't belong individually. I think you belong with, if you feel like you belong, it's because it's a collective belonging, because you belong alongside other people.
Yeah, totally, totally. And what factors do you need to see, or do you need to feel maybe in places, in collectives, in environments?
See, I think the thing is that quite often when you're from an ethnic minority, that you come from a position where you feel like you don't belong, or have a bit of imposter syndrome, or because I when I was 15, so I think this is kind of like where I always go back to when I and I think it's about your own character as well, in terms of belonging. Because I think I was 14 or I was 15, I had a meeting with my careers advisor, and she asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, oh, I think I'd quite like to go to university and study law. And she said, well, girls like you don't go to university, do they? And they don't study law, so maybe you should aim lower. Um, and then that made me think that I didn't belong in that environment. I wasn't. I didn't. Me from my culture. What she was implying was that girls from your culture
Mm,
don't go into higher education. Um, and it was true that not many did. However, how can we get a sense of belonging unless we are encouraged to belong?
yeah.
So I came out of that meeting and I was like, for a few moments, I thought she's right. I don't belong in that environment, and maybe I should listen to her. Maybe I should quit school at 16 and go just get a normal job. Um, but then I thought, no, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go. I am going to. I really wanted to go to university. The thing is, what she didn't realize is she was like stamping on the hopes of like a 5-year old, because since I could remember, I wanted to go to university since I was really little, and nobody in my community had gone to university. Nobody in my family had gone on in school past the age of 15 or 16. So where I got the idea from, I'm not really sure. But all I know is it's what I wanted to do. I'd grown up with this dream. And I had to face so many obstacles, cultural obstacles, and hurdles. And then there's this woman who's just saying to me, "Oh, maybe that's not for you." So I think a sense of belonging. Sometimes we have to fight to belong as well, if we care about it enough. You know. So I think belonging has it's like a two-way street sometimes. Sometimes you have to want to belong, and those that you want that environment you want to belong to has to want to have you as part of it. If you know what, I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's
Yeah.
like a two-way thing. You have to want to be there. They have to want you there. Sometimes, no matter how much you want to belong, you don't belong. I
Mm,
was doing a presentation, and me and this another woman from the group were doing a lecture, and somebody was saying, "Oh, what about men or something?" Well, there was no room for us on that table with men, so we made our own table, right? So if you sometimes in all male environments it is very difficult to belong, or in all white environments, or in, whatever the environment might be where you would like to belong. Sometimes you'd like to belong, but you just can't get there. You just can't be part of that. So, that's what I said to him. I said, well, there was no room on your table of just men. So, us ladies, we made our own table, and that's what you have to do sometimes. Then I belong.
And I'm curious, as you decided to pursue and go to university, how did you find belonging, on that path, as it was so hostile to start with?
Well, it was difficult. My mom passed away just a few months before my A levels, so for me that was really, really hard. So it was a hard journey to start with, to be honest. But I guess I think I felt like I owed it to her and to myself to carry on. So university, actually, I felt like I belonged straight away. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I threw myself into it. I worked hard. And again, I think I've always been one of these people that I feel like if I work hard enough, then I will get to where I want to. I think hard work is probably the key. But there's certain environments where they would probably welcome you, but you don't want to belong because you don't feel like you identify with it, even though it's probably an environment that would welcome you. So it's strange, isn't it? How I think belonging is a mindset as well. So recently, I just had an email a few days ago from Durham University asking me to be part of an event, a panel, quite a prestigious event they hold, to be part of a panel, to speak on this panel alongside other uh, you know, influential females. And initially, I thought, oh wow, I'm not sure if I'm the right person. Then I thought, this is such a lovely honor, and it would be lovely to like just go. And I just, that little seed of doubt from right from the careers advisors room sometimes pops up in my head. That, oh, am I really up for, is this really me? Because you kind of think sometimes you just think, oh, other people do things like that, not me. And I'm always surprised by people's generosity and their belief in me and their kindness of words and their the faith they put in me. So yeah, obviously I've accepted, and it's going to be a great. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to love it. In fact, and I think that sometimes your past can sometimes creep up on you, and when people have made you feel a bit inferior, or made you feel like you don't belong in a certain environment, and sometimes you just have to shut it down and just enjoy the environment, enjoy belonging to something like that.
Yeah, you certainly belonged there, or at least, the what I mean is that you deserved
Oh,
to
thank you.
be there. Yeah, that's such a fantastic also recognition, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious if you have any advice for people, maybe, people that identify with being in a minority group or underrepresented group, and they don't feel that they belong. What advice would you have for them?
My advice would be to go with your own instincts. I think it's always good to gauge opinion and get people's advice, but ultimately you have to be your own boss. You have to know that it doesn't matter what anybody says at the end of the day. What do you want to do? What is your passion? What do you want to strive for? I mean, I always ask people when they come on my writing courses. I always ask them, why do you want to write? Because if you can figure out why you want to write, it will come more naturally. It will come easier to you. So it's the same with when you're striving to become something or do something. Why do you want to do it? If you're clear in your mind why you want to do it, you will always find a path to it. It might not be straight, and it might be like one of those, garden mazes. I forget what they're called now. You might have to do a few left and right turns, but you'll get there in the end. I think it's self belief, and also I'd just say it's hard work. It's literally hard work. I think if anybody tells you there are shortcuts in life, that's just not true. Sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you just meet the right person at the right time. But that's very rare, and it's only occasional. And then the rest of the time it is about hard work. So I would just say go with your own instincts, work hard, and never apologize for who you are. If you know you're doing something good, you're never going to be encroaching on a space. You belong there like anybody else. If you've worked hard for it, you belong to be in that space. So just be bold, and just believe in yourself, I think is what I'd say.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this advice. And I hope it resonates with, some. And to, like you said, even sometimes if something resonates with one person,
Yeah,
uh, it makes it also so worth it.
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Abda, for taking the time and being on the Belonging Project podcast. I truly appreciate it, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my absolute pleasure.
You can follow the podcast on LinkedIn at the Belonging Project Podcast. You can also hit subscribe and stay up to date with our episodes. And do feel free to get in touch with me on coaching@fiorenzarossini.com. Thank you again and see you next time.